Habakkuk part 2 of 6 parts. Habakkuk chapter 1 verses 2 through 4. Habakkuk's first complaint. Pope Benedict, he once visited Auschwitz, the concentration camp there, and his words were this: in a place like this, words fail. In the end, there can be only a dread silence, a silence which itself is a heartfelt cry to God, almost crying out, "Why, Lord, did you remain silent?" And that can be understood by any of us, and any of us would be crying out in that silence, or maybe even loudly, "Why, Lord?" It was so devastating. It was so horrible. But Habakkuk, he makes such a cry here. Is there an explanation for your actions in the face of evil and suffering, God? So Habakkuk is questioning. He's making his complaint. He's not questioning God. He's making his complaint. Christians may come into times, all of us, when we're utterly bewildered, totally overtaken by what's going on, just like Habakkuk was. He begins his lament with, "How long, O Lord? How long, Lord?" And Habakkuk is talking to the covenant Lord Yahweh, the affectionate Hebrew name for God in the Old Testament. He's not pouring out a critical, pointing out a critical finger at God. At times people have the same lament. All of us, any of us could have had, but for the wrong reasons. We've got to have our it's got to be for the right reason to inquire of the Lord. You can't point fingers at God. God is sovereign. God does what God does. He knows more than we know. His ways are so much higher than ours. But Habakkuk has a problem with the trouble that seems to continue in Judah. So his problem is that it seems that God isn't doing anything. And so he's crying out, "How long? How long, Lord?" How long is also an Old Testament question that God had for his own people, asking them, "How long will you continue in sin?" So Habakkuk 1 verse 2, he says, "O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear?" And "hear" contains the thought of help, or cry to you, violence, and you will not save. So Habakkuk is not found to be prayerless. Sometimes people make it sound like his complaint or his lament, but they don't pray. You can make a complaint, you can make a lament, but you don't pray as he prayed. Habakkuk had learned already to persevere in prayer. He's prayed many times, and he's prayed for long periods of times, and despite seemingly doing all the right things. Let me say that again, despite seemingly doing all the right things. And don't we feel like that at times? Habakkuk is in a perplexing situation. His belief about God is being tested. The perplexity can come from God's inactivity, because Habakkuk believes in the powerful, just God of Israel. He believes God acts and delivers. He believes God judges the wicked and deals with wrongdoing here and now. And then Habakkuk 1 and 3, "Why do you make me see iniquity, and why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me, strife and contention arise." But now God is not acting like Habakkuk thinks he should. And God isn't acting in a way that Habakkuk would. So Habakkuk sees the problems, the iniquity, the sin, the brutal treatment that people are giving each other, and he's disgusted. So if he were powerful enough, what do you suppose Habakkuk would do? He would act. He would take over. He would act now. He would get things done now. Habakkuk 1:4 says, "So the law is paralyzed, and justice never goes before. For the wicked surround the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted." And then in verse 16, Habakkuk is also jealous for God and his ways. The word he uses is paralyzed. So people's hearts have grown cold. They don't care about the Bible. Oh, how this has happened in Western society even. Look at our world today. God is also the God of the underdog. He is the God of justice. He stands up for the helpless. But then Habakkuk laments that he's not doing that now. So he's perplexed with God's inactivity. It matters to Habakkuk. It matter to God? That's what he's thinking. You know what? I just want to say here, Christians are not rebuked for having these types of questions. Habakkuk had them. We're so much like him sometimes. We have questions too. God is actually listening to Habakkuk. He's not mad at him. But God is simply doing something that Habakkuk does not understand. How many times is it that way with us? But the Lord will help him. And us too. We may come into these types of situations, and as long as our heart attitude is right, questions are not wrong. God doesn't care if you ask questions. But your heart attitude does need to be right. Habakkuk is issuing a cry of faith. He's actually trying to understand the character and the ways of God. So in closing, in part 3, and I'm keeping these short because I know some people don't have time to even listen to an hour of on a video. So he's trying to understand the character and the ways of God, and isn't that so much like us? He's not condemning God. He's not drawing judgmental conclusions and ascribing wickedness to God. Not in any way, shape, or form. And we should never, ever, ever do that either. And then let me close here, and I'm going to start part 3 singly or by itself.